Every human being hides something they've done in the past. We all have a secret that no one will ever know. And that's what happened to Aileen Plunket. Poor rich girl. The story I'm going to tell you now has been kept secret for many, many years. Aileen Plunket, a beautiful young girl, daughter of Ernest Guinness, second son of beer magnate Edward Guinness, was a family of very wealthy businessmen, owners of the Guinness Brewery, located in St. James's Gate in Dublin, Ireland. Aileen Plunket lived with her parents at Glenroon Chapelizat near Dublin. She was the eldest of her two sisters, Maureen Constance Guinness and Nuna Guinness. Their father, Ernest Guinness, showered them with pampering and expensive gifts. He loves to spend money on his darling daughters and see them very happy. They were known as Guinness Golden Girls. The year was 1919, and Aileen Plunket was 15 years old. One day she went to visit the family brewery with her father and her two sisters. While walking through the factory, she asked her father for permission to see the other departments of the brewery. Amidst so many factory workers, she saw a handsome young man. That young man caught her attention. When he looked at her, Aileen Plunket just stood motionless with her eyes fixed on his eyes. And in the same way he had his eyes fixed on her eyes, no sound came out of her mouth except her breathing deep. She described that moment as if her soul had left her body. To connect with his soul, an overwhelming passion took over her body. Her body was shaking, her hands sweating, a mixture cold and hot. She was sure she was looking at the love of her life. Then he came towards her and said, "Good morning, Lady Aileen Plunket. My name is Rian." They were connected in their gazes. She tried hard not to let her father see what was happening. The fact is that Aileen Plunket was madly in love with Rian. But there was one small problem with Rian. At the time of 1920 onwards, marriages between two people from different social classes were not common, specifically women. They would have to marry a man with the same level of wealth, or a much richer man, to maintain the style of luxury standard living. Rian was not even middle class. He was extremely poor. He lived with his family in a slum in Dublin. Remembering that Dublin had some of the worst slums in contemporary Europe at that time, his family was going through financial difficulties. Rian was 19 years old. He was the oldest among his 5 siblings. He was lucky to get a job at St. James's Gate Brewery, Guinness Brewery. They went on their first date to Glendalough, which has one of the most beautiful landscapes in Ireland. Their first date was overwhelming. They were sure they wanted to live together for the rest of their lives. The first kiss was a meeting of souls. They had several hidden dates in the same place, until the day they decided to have their first intimate moment together. Rian wrote in his diary, "In the heart of nature, there was a simple cabin. The sun was about to set, and inside that simple cabin in a warm bed, there were our naked bodies under the sheets making love. We were in constant motion, our bodies dancing with each other, my breath getting deeper as I begged for more of her love. My hand slid over her soft skin. The most intense and hottest parts of my body not only touched her body, but they touched her soul. And the most intense and hottest parts of her body touched my body and my soul. I I wanted this moment to last forever. Rian bought a diary to record his life and that of his family. He also included the wonderful experiences he had with his beloved Aileen Plunket. But this secret would not last long because of one detail. A big problem in the middle of this story was Kevin. He was very rich at that time, very handsome, and his beauty captivated the attention of many ladies. Kevin was a strong candidate to be Aileen Plunket's boyfriend. Her father appreciated the affection Kevin gave Aileen Plunket. Kevin sent flowers, letters, gifts to spoil Aileen Plunket. Her father allowed them to date, but Aileen Plunket couldn't love Kevin. He was possessive of her. He was very jealous. He was so jealous that he didn't let Aileen Plunket visit her own friends. One day Aileen Plunket very kindly talked to Kevin and said she couldn't love him. She apologized, so she broke up with Kevin. All the ladies in town wanted to date rich and handsome Kevin, but to Aileen Plunket he was just another rich man. He meant nothing to her, and that made Kevin mad with rage. Kevin got very angry and started chasing Aileen Plunket. Kevin paid his henchmen to monitor Aileen Plunket's every move, which is how he found out that she was seeing Rian. Immediately he told her father. Ernest Guinness loved his daughter. Normally at that time, father acted with a lot of brutality and anger when discovering something like that about his daughter. But Ernest Guinness was different. He had a great love for his daughters. He would never be rude to any of them, so he talked to his daughter and said that he understood her great love for Rian, but they couldn't be together. He promised her that Rian and her family would never go through difficulties because he would help. Aileen Plunket cried a lot and begged her father to let her date Rian, but he apologized and said there was nothing that could be done. Rian loved Aileen Plunket with all his heart. He explained everything to Aileen Plunket's father, but her father said that for the love he has for his daughter, he would keep Rian's job at the factory, so he gently asked Rian to step away from his daughter. 8 months passed, and Rian was suffering a lot from not being able to see Aileen Plunket, until one day they met again in another secret place. Aileen Plunket's father already knew that she was trying to date Rian again. Ernest Guinness hired someone to keep an eye on his daughters every step. He didn't take any action about it. He pretended he didn't know, silent in his time. Ernesto found a nice rich man who would be Aileen Plunket's boyfriend so that soon she could get married. So Aileen Plunket's father chose Brinsley Sheridan to be his daughter's boyfriend. He was a good man, generous gentleman. But unfortunately, Aileen Plunket would never love him. Kevin was always contacting Aileen Plunket, trying to convince her to date him, but the line wouldn't accept it, until one day Aileen Plunket left alone to go for a walk in Dublin. So Kevin put her in his car and took her to his house and forced her to have intimate moments with him. Kevin forced her to stay one day with him in his house. Aileen Plunket's whole family was worried because she never slept outside the house. The next day, Kevin took Aileen Plunket to her house. Kevin himself, in his madness, told everything he did to Aileen Plunket's father. So Ernest Guinness had an intense fight with Kevin. and forbade him to see Aileen Plunket, otherwise Kevin would be arrested by the police authorities. But that only increased Kevin's anger. Each day that passed, he became more obsessed with Aileen Plunket. In 1920, her father authorized Brinsley Sheridan to date. Aileen Plunket was very sad because she loved Rian. Ernest Guinness knew of his daughter's deep sadness, so he had a good idea. He organized a great trip to try to make her happy. In 1923, she and her sisters were sent on a world tour in her father's high-masted yacht. The years went by, and Rian was always trying to change his financial life. He hoped that Aileen Plunket's father would allow him to marry her one day. In 1925, he managed to own a used shoe repair shop, but it was not enough for Aileen Plunket's level of wealth. Over the years, Aileen Plunket and Rian always found a way to have a secret date. What the years have taught Kevin is that Aileen Plunket truly loved Rian, and that made him furious. Kevin wanted to take away what she loved most. He wanted to see her suffer. Until 1927, Aileen Plunket's father decided that it would be the perfect year for her to get married. She was in panic and realized that this could be the end. She hoped her father would change his mind and let her marry Rian. So Aileen Plunket and Rian decided to elope before the wedding. They decided to elope 2 months before the wedding. They decided to go to Naples in Italy. Kevin watched Aileen Plunket all the time and got to know that Aileen Plunket planned to elope with Rian. Kevin knew that he would never have the chance to marry her, so he would make her suffer. He made plans to end Rian's life. Kevin, it would ruin Aileen Plunket's escape plans. 2 months before the wedding, Aileen Plunket and Rian were ready to elope. At 5 in the morning they left. She put on a wig so that no one would recognize her. Upon arriving at the train station, Kevin and his henchmen were waiting for Aileen Plunket and Rian. When Aileen Plunket saw Kevin, she felt fear and terror in her entire body. Kevin's henchmen took Rian into the car, gagged him, and bound his hands and feet, while Kevin took Aileen Plunket to another car. She begged Kevin not to harm Rian. Kevin told her, "This is what happens to you for not loving me." Kevin and his henchmen took Rian and Aileen Plunket to the cliffs of Maher. They are located on the west coast of Ireland. He chose this place because it was far away from Dublin. No one would see what he was going to do. Kevin beat Rian while she, screaming, asked him to stop. Kevin wanted to kill Rian by throwing him off the cliff. Aileen Plunket fought with Kevin to try to save the life of her love. Rian had no more strength. His body was all bloodied because Kevin attacked him with a lot of violence. Then Kevin dragged Rian to the cliff. Aileen Plunket grabbed his hands, trying to pull him back, but Rian's hands were slick with blood. Rian, with his eyes fixed Aileen Plunket's eyes, he said, "You are my first and only love of my whole life." Then Rian fell off the cliff over 10 meters high. Aileen Plunket was in shock, screaming for her love. She was in tears, so Kevin dragged her to the car, taking her back to the train station. Kevin had already sent his henchmen to let Aileen Plunket's father know about her attempted escape. Upon arriving at the train station, Aileen Plunket's father had a violent fight with Kevin for the death of Rian. Kevin was arrested by the authorities, but as Kevin was very rich, so in a week he was released. Aileen Plunket's father was very sad for his daughter's suffering. He blamed himself for everything that happened, but she was not angry with her father because she knew he loved her. Aileen Plunket's father was so sad that he decided to help Rian's family until the last day of his life. 2 months passed and the wedding had to happen. Because everything was already prepared, Aileen Plunket's father gave Luttrell's Down Castle as a gift for her. But nothing would make Aileen Plunket happy. Basically, she saw her love die right in front of her. It was a very big trauma. She got depressed. On her wedding day, she tried to put a smile on her face, but inside she was hurting, screaming in pain. She just wanted to disappear. Years passed until one day, Rian's sister went to Aileen Plunket's house to give her his diary. It was a painful and emotional meeting. In the diary, Rian wrote all his moments with her since they met. In the white pages, Aileen Plunket completed the rest of their history.
Aileen Plunket's husband, Mr. Brinsley Sheridan Bush Plunket, was killed during the war, just after they had divorced in 1940. Aileen Plunket moved to London to live there for the rest of her life. She died on the 31st of March 1999.